Hey, welcome into another edition of Tony Talking Trash About Music. Today, I'm going to be covering a band I don't see a whole lot about. It was a band that kind of had two phases to it and two very distinctly different phases, and it's connected to Zappa. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about Andre Lewis, the keyboard player between the cracks there, between George Duke and later when Tommy Mars and that group came in and Peter Wolf. I'm talking about the man who manned the keyboards during a lot of 1976. I believe he was on the Japan tour. Andre Lewis. Andre Lewis and his two bands that he had. One with his extremely talented wife. Maxayn was her nickname. One of the Ikettes, along with Tina Turner and of course P.P. Arnold, who sang the great vocal with Steve Marriott in Tin Soldier. But he actually played at the time with Frank for a short period of time, and it actually happened between the two. If you're talking about between the two bands, and what do I mean by between the two bands? Well, when you first talk about Maxayn, Maxayn Lewis was a soul singer musician who played, and she was a little bit. I don't want to say not pop oriented, but she probably was the most gospel oriented. Her voice of the three that I just mentioned, the three Ikettes or the three girls that three gal singers that came out of Ike's band. Her name was originally Paulette Parker. She was described between Roberta Flack and Aretha Franklin, which is pretty good. She was born in Tulsa. Listened to all the big band stuff growing up, and it was worked with Bobby Blue Bland, so she did the whole thing of coming up behind and found she had a bunch of songs, but ended up finding Andre, and she'd been playing so many songs, background vocals all the way. The Gap Band, Celine Dion, you're talking about BB King, Rita Coolidge, Gino Vanelli, Tower of Power. I mean, she sang on almost everything. Billy Preston, Rufus, Grease, the soundtrack. She lived in Tokyo. Currently, she lives in Los Angeles. But we're talking about Andre. We're talking about Andre. He grew up also in the Midwest there in Omaha. And eventually, the thing that's so strange about this dude is that he ended up known as Mandré, the Masked Marauder. He was like a mascot, like an electronic early mascot, space age of the future with a little bit of Sun Ra mixed in. And this is kind of so you have a band. The beginning of this band, what I'm talking about, is this Maxayn, and this was a soul band that started off. Really, it consisted of the singer that I just told you about, Maxayn, who ended up coming from the Ikettes, Andre, her husband, Emery Thomas, and Hank Red. The only hit they had was this hit called "Check Out Your Mind." It was a I believe that was the one associated with Curtis Mayfield. It's Curtis Mayfield's son thing, but they were originally from Los Angeles, 72 to 74. So really, Andre Lewis's connection with Zappa and a lot of the other stuff he did was in that window between 74 and when Mandrés come. But it took it from Maxayn Lewis. He was a former uh, Ike, and their music really progressed. It went from an organ-based soul thing that you're going to hear, and it ended up progressing into a more synthesized thing. And by the time it was done, I don't see that the Capricorn really knew what to do with them. If you're talking about, Capricorn, who really had a lot of the Southern rock things and did not really have a lot of soul music on it. So to me, there was a lot of failure. It seemed, at least at the time, the awareness was not there. They did show up occasionally on Soul Train. They were on Soul Train at least once for check out your mind. But then the thing morphs into Mandré. And when Mandré comes out, he's the masked marauder. You can't even see his face. He's got a space thing and he's playing synthesizer music. Beginning, Maxayn's in the stuff and she's singing some, but contributing less and less as time goes on. And it kind of loses its steam in a way. This is the same period. This is way before Daft Punk. This is way before, and any of these bands with this stuff came. And I'll show you later as we go on. But it's a pretty amazing body of work. And to think that he went from what he did with Zappa, and I didn't hear that much electronic influence with that kind of stuff with his music with that. He's very organ based, very gospel based. I mean, you can hear the stuff. But today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rank these records, and I'm going to rank these. Uh, I guess you want to call it 7 records, if you want to call it that. Mandré had Mandré himself had 4 records. The fourth record that he had uh, was one that was essentially put out, but not really put out in any form. There's a big long story about it online. I can tell you this from right now. This is going to be my number 7. You can put it up there now, Joe, to start this off. But it's going to be Mandré 4. It was really released independently after his Motown contract expired. This record was in 1982. Evidently, there's some problems in the warehouse, and a lot of them were damaged. Some came out. It's rare because of its rarity, but if you hear the songs, there's a certain demo-y hiss. The sound quality is not the best, even on the finished version of this. And it really, at that point, it drifted into almost a background music synthesizer thing. That at that point, synthesizers were coming into their new time, and it wouldn't be too long before the Fairlight and Synclavier were in the picture, and the whole genre would be turned on its head. But we're talking about the days back of during the Tamita and during the different periods of time when that was happening. But that was 1982, and that's Mandré number 4. Not really my kind of thing. I find it not that well recorded. It kind of sounds like a better, like a local project. So to me, I would not recommend that as that. And so that would be not my number 4 would be Mandré number 4. I'm going to go next to my number 6, and my number 6, as I'm looking here, is going to be the second Mandré, and that's Mandré 2. And you can already see the marketing right here on this record. You look at this guy; he's got his helmet on, and you can see the helmet here. There's a certain thing when I guess he went out and he went on tour and he played this stuff. This number 2, when you talk about number 2, you're kind of talking about a progression. So I need to explain to you a little bit. As the Mandré situation went on, uh, it ended up being a little bit different. You ended up a more R&B thing by this time. They were trying to go a little bit of distorto to his lead vocals, and Andre Lewis. By the time they got into this number 2, he was doing most of the vocals here. I think that's just there. It doesn't sound to me. It sounds to me like very dancey and very much like they're trying to move it into micro adjust this sound or this concept that he had and micro adjust it to more views, but it really never happened. I mean, this record came out. I don't know what touring he did. I don't think much. He thanks Maxayn here, but I don't think that Maxayn really has a lot to do with this one. This is really where the things come in. I like your freaky ways, fair game. Codename MM3. A lot of these things are these long instrumental songs that would, kind of Billy Preston out of space thing, except like a more modern way. And I just don't think, at this point that the world was really ready for it. You're talking about this record here, and this record was put out when this was 1978. So it's very early on. You're talking about the early days of Prince. So this I think is probably the most lost of the bunch of the whole of them. Maxayn and this from you're talking about 72 all the way to this time in 78. I would say that is the next to the worst. I'm going to stay with Mandré again. And everybody, has a different view of this. You may have the Mandré records and thinking that because as a pioneer of a synthesizer, I'll give you, he was one of the first there. But when you listen to these records from a musical standpoint, which is mostly what I am doing, this is Mandré 3000. This is M3000. And this is number 3. And you've got Opus 6, which is a song, Final Funk, Spirit Groove. But these are like, this is a different thing too. It's got a kind of a more of an electric fade in sound and you've got these. It's all synth stuff, almost all instrumental. The vocals that you have eventually move themselves. The last song here, Final Funk, which is total Parliament Funkadelic, which he talked about, in promoting this, that he's funkier than Funkadelic. And it is a really funky thing. I mean, if you like funk music, get this. The problem is the sounds on these records, a lot of these, uh, some people say they date the sound. They don't bother me because I don't really listen to them in that context. But if you're going to be sitting around, playing Gary Newman and playing these kind of stuff, you're really playing stuff that has a different low end. It has a different thing. This has a hard low end. The problem is a lot of times when he playing drums, there's not a lot of live drums on some of these. Sometimes you can tell they were programmed to put together, and it doesn't hit that hard. I would appreciate a more live sound here. And I think, you've definitely got the Rick James thing starting to happen here on the second side. We're talking about Spirit Groove and Freakin's Fine. You can hear that. You can hear you got the how coming in, and the P Funk stuff. The vocals are definitely not as strong though. On the second song, it's really a letdown here. The Do What You Got to Do. It's just not, to me, is a definite downgrade from this. And I'm sitting, Maxayn sitting on the sideline here during a lot of this. And to me, I just think it was a bad move to go, especially in this. Evidently, this was the last hurrah for them. There was no contract revised. And then following this, of course, you got four that came out then later at that time. But if you're talking about the years with this, well, this was 1979. And this is in 3 years in a row, 77, 78, 79. So Mandré had a lot of time. Andre had a lot of time to get everything together, probably a lot of money. And that's how that goes. Now let's talk about here. I want to talk again about, let me see if I can get back here forward. Hold on. See if I can get back here. Let's talk about Maxayn here. And I'm going to talk about my number 4 here is going to be the debut record. People are going to say, isn't that one of the peaks? Well, some people think it is a peak. And this is probably one of their most best loved records. Why is this a best loved record? Well, the one thing I didn't tell you, and you haven't heard yet from this, one of their shticks was, and I hate to, you hate to say this, but you know how Tina Turner came out of the whole thing with the Rolling Stones had done the thing. These guys were famous for doing what? A cover of You Can't Always Get What You Want. And on the other, if that's not enough, a cover of Gimme Shelter too. Just a little bit much. And I guess that's maybe what got him signed to the rock label. I'm not sure. But you've got Maxayn, who can play piano, is a great pianist too. And they said she actually played French horn well too. And Andre plays basically everything else. And you've got the other two, Horseshoe Wright and Emery Thomas playing. And those are your four Marauders back there in the back. Well, actually, he's the only Marauder. But this is the first record, and it's different in that it's more natural. There's more organ in this. There's less synthesizer, even though there's synthesizer all over it. The drum sound, it sounds probably a little more like a band than any other of the records. And I think Maxayn, of course, they tried to market this. They tried to market it like any other soul deal. And let me show you some of the pictures inside this. Beautiful Capricorn Records. They spent the money to have this gatefold. I guess is the last one that they did, but as you can see, it's on Capricorn. It's just odd when you think of all the Southern rock on Capricorn. It talks about this album should be listened to in a crowd. Marty Silva, don't be afraid to turn it up and smoke it. So they're trying to link it to the rock thing. They're trying to link it to the popularity of Ike and Tina. They're trying to, the Tina Turner connection to the Rolling Stones. And I understand that this record was the first one. It was 1972, and that's when it was hot, and that's what was happening. But that is my number 4 when you're talking about the Maxayn and Mandré. For number 3, I am going to go with the Last Curious record, which has a beautiful cover of Maxayn having a good time. Bail Out for Fun, which is a strange record name. And they look like they're jumping out of a plane, or they're falling out of here. And this is a curious record. This record has some of the best. The first side of this record, I think, is really, really, really good. And I like the vibe on it. I think it's good. There's a lot of clavinet. You know, he's really hitting hard on the clav, and I'm a huge clav fan. So like I love Terry Adams, I love it, but this guy gives it a workout on this record especially. And the first one, you know, even the last song, you know, in the first side, I think what's called Moon Funk, to me sounds like it's leaning towards where Mandré was going. So everything got more electronic as it went. And I'm not necessarily thinking it was always good for that. But the second song here now, man, the second side, the second side, just different. And they all had little quotes here at the end. And I think they realized that this may be the last thing. It's a party song. Fun is a party song. And they got a ballad and get the gospel stuff again. But everything begins with you is super chill. And, you know, I just think that when you look at this record, you can tell that they are being pushed, that they have substance to what they are, but you can feel that substance being compromised, and you can feel that they are really probably in a realization that this is it. And this was it. This was their last record on Capricorn, or their third one. You don't see it out. You don't see it very much, but that's it's called Bailout for Fun, and I think that was a good 1974 record, Capricorn number 125. Let's get down here to the next, and we've only really got two left. That was my number three. My number two is going to be, of course, The Shock of the First Mandré record, and there he is, The Masked Marauder. This is 3 years after the 1974, the last one that we just talked about, Bailout for Fun was, comes the return. And this return is different. Now, we've got really great vocals on this from Maxayn, too. Maxayn provided really fantastic vocals here. And this first record is completely different. Now, it sounds different. He's in a spacesuit. They advertise this thing about he's like, you know, born from Sun Ra, where he can't. But it's got a dream. It's, you know, one of the songs sounds like a Dream Weaver, that fade in, that kind of ARP fade in thing with early synth sounds. But you know, it flows good, and there was nothing like it at the time. So I'm kind of giving it a break here in the time. When you listen to it now, you think, okay, well, what is this? It's just like some synthesizer demonstration record. Well, in a way, it kind of was, but there was some great instrumental funk on this record, and of course, you know, one of the songs that was the hit Solar Flight Opus 1. That was his big one, but that's what he came with. One of the things that I find interesting about this first record is I like his version of Money. That's what I want, but I don't like the version Dirty Love Zappa at the end. It sounds almost gratuitous. I would have rather he not did that and done something that would have been more there. But it's kind uh, of a callback to Frank, you know, I guess. And this is after he played with Frank and been back, but this is doing his own thing with Motown. And I'm supposing that's why he left Frank, which hasn't been said a whole lot. But he has his own contract, he has his own gig, and has his own synthesizer thing, and he's trying something new. And that was Mandré in 1977, where he was the masked marauder and dropped upon an unsuspecting crowd. Anyway, number one, folks, it's going to be the second Maxayn record, Mindful. This is the one. If you find it, if you get any of them, this is the one. This is the one. Why? Because this is the one, I think, before there was any pressure towards the Mandré thing. This is before, I think, maybe they realized that it was too much, and they really put this record out in how they wanted to. And if you see the bottom of this, they speak a little bit on the back about from Al Wapples, from some KGFJ, and Los Angeles is really trying to get this done. But again, this was Andre Lewis's production. The songs on this, I think, were extremely strong. I think that's what really sets it apart. I think the Love Is Near is great. The second song, I think the vocals are superb. Feeling You, it really has a right mix of gospel, funk, and a little bit of electronic movement in. Traveling really just beautiful. If that's the last song, yeah, that's the last song on there. Really is gorgeous too. Check out Your Mind, of course. That's a single. You can look at that and find them on Soul Train playing that. But again, that's a Curtis song, so that's what I always associate with Curtis Mayfield anyway. But Feeling the Answer, Telling You, I just love it. I think this is a record that should, if you're into soul music, to me, this has got the perfect balance. She's a great vocalist. As far as live presentation and knocking it out the same, I don't think that she had the same excitement live. Perhaps it's somebody like Tina did, or maybe even PP did. But I think she's a fantastic singer, and I think Andre Lewis is a fascinating subject. And for him to carry the beginning of Maxayn on 72 and continue to process it up through you know the end, when I guess he gave up on the Mandré project in 82, but he worked for a little bit longer, worked for a lot of other people too in his days. Worked with The Who, Patti LaBelle, Grant Green, Buddy Miles Band before Rufus, Earth, Wind and Fire. He was actually the band leader of Johnny Good Guitar Watson, and he died in Louisiana and in 2012. God rest his soul. And anyway, a curious path for somebody like that. That he gave it up and he had all this opportunity, and it just goes to show you that if the company like Motown, even though they had everything together with soul, a lot of the stuff, if you look during that period, though, the late 70s, things weren't going real well. They didn't really have their big blockbuster people. They had Stevie, and that was about it. A lot of their people had gone, and so it was a time where they were really counting on these guys to make it happen. So it must have been interesting to, he turns down playing with Frank so he can have his own thing, and then unfortunately after a period of time it fails. But Maxayn was a completely rich band and totally beautiful, and it almost leads naturally into Mandré, as I spoke about especially on some of those tracks on the last couple records. But anyway, I find it very fascinating. So, and I hope you guys do too. They were a band that is not a whole lot is talked about, and so I think just to fill in that little space and time, when I think Zappa was kind of having trouble with his record label at the time too. So I think maybe that's why Andre didn't pop up more on more stuff. But it was kind of a dead period for Frank. But just a shame for him, and that Maxayn and Mandré really never make it. You can get all these records. You should be able to get these in a pretty reasonable amount. So I would caution you to get them as quick as you can, because they're probably going to drop like everything else does. They did make a whole lot of them, but anyway, anybody curious about that? And is the complexity of Zappa in there? No, but there is some nice arrangements, and there are nice things, especially on the records that I spoke at the end. That second one, Mindful, is really spectacular, and I think the first Mandré record is interesting in that that's kind of like a historical artifact. But any of the Maxayn records they're all decent. So, but anyway, I thank y'all for tuning in, and we will come at you with something new next time, and we will catch you later. Hey, please leave your comments. I'm sorry. Please leave your comments, and let's see what you can do to help me out. Hit that like button, please. I appreciate that. And we always have a seat here for you guys. And anyway, leave your comments below. Leave your list below. Leave any comments you have about Andre Lewis. He's much maligned. I'm sure there are people that love him. That I never got to see the guy live, and I wish I would have. Never did. But anyway, talk to you guys later, and we will catch you next time with something fresh and new. Thanks.